Just wanted to show you something. That is a little bit of Permatex. So, came off the end of this bolt. So somebody has been inside this once before. Probably trying to seal it up, because I think the oil ran out of it about as fast as I could pour it in there earlier. Part of the reason I wanted to rebuild this. Let's see what this guy comes out as. Yep, there's been Permatex in there. It took a little bit of force to suck that bolt out. So I'll get the other two pulled. There's two more at the bottom. Come back and talk. Okay, so I got this guy out. One of my personal pet peeves in this world is Permatex. It has its place. I don't mind it most of the time. I'm not going to deny I use it on a lot of things. But if I have the time to make a gasket, then I'm going to use it. Or not use the Permatex, but I'm going to make the gasket. I'm going to make it nice. In this case, obviously, there is no gasket. They just Permatex gasket, which is fine and, whatever. But I don't really like it. In the amount of time it took to Permatex this, that was about all the oil that was in there. It's supposed to be half full. There's actually a plug right there. Well, maybe not quite half, but at least, a quarter of the way full. It ran out all the time. I filled it up to where I thought it was supposed to be, and apparently it wasn't. So, in the long run, we will put a gasket on this. I like gaskets. I don't like just Permatexing it. If you got the time to go into something and fix it right. A little Permatex on a gasket, which I think is fine, but just straight up Permatex sometimes is just not the answer, especially when you're dealing with oil. Or in this case, in a compartment where it may or may not be sealed, and it might receive, a little bit of pressure from the actual engine crankcase. Make a gasket. Take the time, do it right. I'm going to get this mess cleaned up and get that sump wiped out, and we'll get this pulled apart over here, and then we'll come back. Okay, so got the reduction gear out of the housing. I like what I see. It's pretty clean. The bearing journal doesn't have any scarring in it or scoring. Looks great. Same with the cover. It's hanging out up there. Looks pretty good inside. A little bit of dirt and, stuff, but I guess we'll really find out when we go to measure things up here. And then we'll really know what the story is. Next thing I'm going to do is undo these 4 bolts here, take this cover off, and then we'll go from there. We'll probably end up pulling the sump off, flipping the engine upside down, pulling the sump, and then we can talk about pulling the magneto plate. Alright, I got this off. 4 fine thread, looks like 5/16 bolts there. Our friend must have been a little bit further into this engine because more Permatex. So, that being said, looks like it's time to flip this guy, and we'll tear the bottom end apart and see what's going on in there. Cylinder looks pretty doggone good. I mean, I don't really understand why it was burning oil, but there's one good score mark right there. But we'll hone that. Well, hone it, I mean, we'll use a glaze breaker and break the glaze up and put a new set of rings. I found that usually takes care of the problem, not always, but we'll give that a shot and see what it does. If not, then I guess things will get a little more interesting. I'll have to find an oversized piston, and we'll bore this bad boy and fix it right. So let me get my hands clean, get it flipped, and come back. Okay, so I got the bolts out. This is that long one from the side with the big hole, as you can see. No, not really. There's the big hole. It's a long bolt, reaches down in there. I did shortchange myself. You do need a 9/16, so one more tool to add to the collection here. So those are the only 2 bolts that hold this bad boy on. You should just be able to pick up the engine and gently tap on the edges, and it should fall off. Usually the gasket holds it in pretty tight. At this point, I would not be surprised if we found Permatex. If he's been into the reduction cover, sure they've been into the bottom. And we'll probably find some behind the magneto plate. So fun and games of something that's, you know, approaching 70 plus years old here. So I'm going to get this popped off and flipped, and then we'll look inside and see what's going on. Okay, so I guess before I flip it, I need to address a few things. So there's a bolt here and a bolt here, and that's what holds this sump cover on. Briggs and Stratton offered many different designs and sump covers depending on who it was going to, the application. So there's quite a few different styles you'll see out there. Some are deep, some are shallow. There's actually, underneath this guy, this big washer covers up a big hole. See if we can show it here on the junk engine, like that. That's for filling the oil if it had a shallow sump on it that didn't have an external oil fill like this. A lot of washing machine engines had it, like Briggs WM, WMB, that style of engine. Those used that style. I've got one of those. We'll have to do another video on that little guy. He needs a rebuild too. I don't think I have all the stuff to do it yet, but we'll get around to that. So I'm going to undo these two bolts, flip it, and pop the cover off, and we'll see what's going on inside. Okay, it actually just fell off. I picked it up and it fell right off. We have a gasket. I'm kind of shocked. So obviously whoever was in here wasn't in here very much. Those fold-over locks that you see right there and right there, they obviously didn't know what they were doing, because those are not folded over. That's a big no-no. Those need to be folded over. Anyways, so this is what the inside of a Briggs cast iron block engine looks like. This is pretty much the same for most all of the engines up into the big ones. Kind of like that guy sitting over here. Pretty much the same thing. This is a Model 23, 8 to 9 horsepower at 3,600 RPM. It's about all I can do to pull that thing over with the starter rope. It takes a lot. There's a lot of engine there, and a lot of oomph. So that's another video we'll have to do on that guy. It's all original and pretty cool, but we'll come back to him later. Yeah, same with that there too. We'll come back to that. Anyways, so from here on out, it's pretty straightforward. Undo the connecting rod with those two bolts. Piston and connecting rod will slide out the top of the bore. And then we can take off the magneto cover, and crankshaft will slide out through a hole there. There's actually a really big hole behind that. It'll all slide out. And then we can take the cam out. We have to use a drift and drive it's a full pin that rides in. That cam's hollow, and we'll drive it out, and then the cam will come out. I'm going to get the piston out of here, out of the way, and then probably get the magneto plate off, and then we can look a little bit at those and talk about that, and then we look at the cam as well. Okay, so I got the piston out. I noticed something interesting. I don't know if you can see that, but there's some cross hatching in the piston. I've never seen that before. I don't know what that is or why. Somebody can probably enlighten me on that. It does look, it's a little worn in a few spots. It'll probably clean up. We can measure it. The rings look okay. They're not too worn down, at least from what we can tell. We'll measure them in the bore and find out. So that can go in our coffee can. Also, the connecting rod bearing here, it looks really clean. There's a couple little scratches in the babbitt. Nothing magical. Well, maybe that's probably just aluminum, not even babbitt. There's the oil hole for it. Another interesting thing, there's a couple variations of these dippers. There's this style over here out of the junk engine. There's this style. Each of them has kind of a fold-over lock retainer. I'll put reference of a really good video about that below. Anyways, so the crankshaft just comes out just like that. Pretty kind of boring, really. in a way. But as you can see, that little flat right there, that's what our plunger rides on for the breaker points. That's the one spot that allows them to open, or to close, excuse me. It's that little flat spot. Crankshaft looks okay, just looking at it, kind of quick visual inspection. Looks pretty clean. I don't know what the paint marking is on it, what that means, but it's pretty good shape. I did find a gasket behind the magneto cover, or the magneto plate. I was surprised. But those gaskets are offered in thousandths of an inch thick, and this is what controls the end play of the crankshaft. This face right here rides against the crankshaft and controls the total amount of end play. But bushing in there looks pretty clean. A little bit worn and a couple little scuff marks in a few spots, but it's pretty clean. Definitely, most likely reusable. Won't have to change that. There's a better view of that governor throttle control linkage. Definitely helps when those are clean and whatnot. Anyways, so right here there's a little plug, and that's where the rod for the camshaft runs. So we'll have to drive that out and drive that camshaft out, and then that's pretty much it. Then we're on to cleaning from this point, and I'll do probably most all that off camera. I'll do a video on making some gaskets and stuff, and some other videos that I've seen that are really great on making these. Other than that, it's kind of pretty much downhill from here. There's not much too exciting about getting the cam out. It just pops out, and that's about it. So thanks for watching.